For the 8th time this season, Kevin Harvick will be celebrating once again out on top. And for the 2nd time in his career, he is going to be doing those burnouts under the lights and the Southern 500 after what was a somewhat dull race, but still added a few fireworks near the end of the race and caused a bit of hiccups for multiple playoff drivers. Welcome to MDK Victory Stop. I'm your host, Jett Krause, and let's recap everything that took place from today's Cookout Southern 500, the first race of NASCAR's playoffs. So already, playoff implications took place before the race even started. Ryan Blaney, who came into the race, I believe, 7th or 8th on the playoff grade, well, he had his crew chief taken away from the racetrack, and he lost 10 bonus points after it was found that his car, going through previous inspection, had an improperly attached ballast. If you don't know what I'm talking about, think of Denny Hamlin in the Coke 600 when a piece came out of his race car right before they took the green flag. Something like that type of part, which is very important. That apparently was not properly attached, and because of that, Blaney lost 10 driver points, 10 owner points, and Blaney's crew chief, Todd Gordon, had to have been ejected from the track. And because of that, he would fall from 7th to now a tie for Kyle Busch below the cut line. That's right. He would be below the cut line heading into this race before he even took the green flag. So Blaney was already in a hole. Also, I should point out, he also had to start at the rear of the field. So this race was very shocking based on how strong Chevrolet was. In stage 1, Chase Elliott, he led the entire way, or basically led almost the entirety of stage 1. Hendrick as a whole was also really strong. Alex Bowman and William Byron were running solidly in the top 10. You had Jimmy Johnson, who started 20th, work his way through the field. And when I say work his way, he worked his way. It was really impressive to see how strong that 48 car was in the early stages of this race. So the second driver to suffer damage or to have an incident in this race came from the Penske stable and Brad Keselowski. Him and Eric Almirola made contact in stage number 2, or stage number 1, I should say. It cut Keselowski's right front tire. He had to come onto pit road after the caution came out, would make multiple repairs, went a lap down. However, after a caution came out during stage 1, Kurt Busch decided to stay out on pit road, and this was a pretty bold move if you know Darlington and tires, how it just eats it up so quickly. Pretty bold move for the one team to stay out, but it would actually work. He would hold on to the lead for a good amount of time before Martrix Jr. would take the lead, and Truex would just drive away. He would go on to win stage 1. Jimmy Johnson, like I said, started in 20th, worked his way up into 2nd place. Very strong run for the 48 team in stage 2, or stage 1, I should say. Chase Elliott in 3rd, Denny Hamlin 4th. 5th is Kurt Busch. So Matt McCall made a great call, keeping Kurt Busch out on the racetrack. Earned some good stage points, earned 6 stage points to be exact, and would finish 5th. 6th, Alex Bowman. 7th, Joe Logano. 8th, William Byron. 9th, Kyle Busch. And 10th, Kevin Harvick. Stage 1 was pretty odd because of course, Darlington, the last 2 times we went there, Harvick and Hamlin won. So we expected Harvick and Hamlin to dominate this entire race, but that was not the case at all, at least for the first part of this race. Harvick had issues with slipping back. Hamlin, he had a good car, but it didn't seem like he had race-winning speed. And it was very odd. It was Truex, that a driver that we have not seen dominate a race in such a long time. He was the class of the field. He had the best speed. He led the most laps. He had the best car, it felt like, while Hamlin and Harvick, the drivers that we expected to run well, seemed like they were taking a back seat. So Ryan Blaney, we talked about earlier on in the show on how he already had problems before the race even started, lost 10 points, had to start at the rear. Well, when stage 2 began, we saw Ryan Blaney on pit road with a reported left rear tire and would go 1 lap down. So while that was taking place, the drivers up front, like Martrix Jr., was typical, seeing him lead. But then we saw Denny Hamlin start to come into form, was able to move up into 2nd place, was able to charge down Martrix Jr. You also had Kurt Busch, who didn't seem like he had a good car, was quietly working his way up into 3rd place, I believe, while Chase Elliott, who led majority of stage 1, started to fall back outside the top 5. So Kevin Harvick pits on lap 42, which was pretty early in terms of normal pit stop cycles, but not too long after, we saw more drivers come on pit road, and then a caution come out in the middle of a pit cycle. Bubba Wallace spun in turn 4. After that caution came out with Bubba Wallace, Brad Keselowski, who stayed out to bank on a caution, got what he wanted, and would come back on the lead lap. And then we restarted 45 laps to go with Truex leading, Harvick in 2nd, Hamlin 3rd, and then Johnson and Bowman 4th and 5th. He wasn't the only driver that had issues. Matt DiBenedetto, who came into the playoffs 16th on the grid, he had a really bad car, and he was even lapped by Mark Truex Jr. 5 laps ago in Stage 2. And to be honest, that's all that would take place in Stage 2. Stage 2 was pretty dull. Truex would win, Hamlin second, Kevin Harvick in third, fourth, Alex Bowman, fifth, Jimmy Johnson, sixth is Kyle Busch, seventh, Eric Jones, 8th, Austin Dillon, 9th, Clint Bowyer, and Kurt Busch rounds out the top 10. So yeah, here's some surprising names in this list in Stage 2. Eric Jones, solid run, 7th place in Stage 2. Austin Dillon, a driver that I don't think any of us expected to be anywhere near the top 10, finishes 8th. So impressive run for these drivers, especially Austin Dillon. We're going to talk about him in a little bit because wow. Stage 3 began with a stack up on the restart. Corey LaJoie had some issue with the engine that caused everything behind him to just check up, including Joe Logano, who suffered what I thought would be significant rear end damage to the point where I thought it would really affect his car, but apparently, no, it was not as much damage to the point where it affected his car aero-wise. But a caution will come out later on with John Hunter Nemechek. I don't know if he cut a rear tire or something like that, but he had a lot of damage to the right side and to the back end of his race car. A lot of sparks were flying, but he would then bring out the caution. And then when the restart came out, you had a new driver in the mix, Kyle Busch. This is the first time in a while we would see even Kyle Busch anywhere near up front, but here he was, side by side with Truex for the race lead. Even though he wouldn't take the lead, he did put up a good fight, but he would settle on for second place behind Truex. The only reason why he was even in that position in the first place due to him gaining 3 spots on pit road. And then once we got later on to the race where we got a long green flag run, obviously pit stops, every driver or every team had to make at least one more pit stop. Well, while everyone else was pitting with under 70 laps to go, Mark Truex Jr. was one of the few to stay out. And in fact, his team told him he had to stay out until 60 laps to go so that they could make it on one more stop. And there were multiple times entering turns 3 and 4, you would see Truex just lose it back in a little bit. His tires were gone almost. He was sliding all over the place, but he would luckily make it onto pit road without any harm. The same can't be said for his teammate Denny Hamlin. Now, Hamlin, I think, was the leader at this time during the race when pit stop cycles were taking place. When he wanted to come onto pit road, apparently no one else knew because Jimmy Johnson ran into the back end of him, and that forced Hamlin to enter in with so much speed, he had to abort the mission. He had to abort his pit stop. He was entering in way too fast, or else he would lock up the brakes, spin out, or have some sort of problem. So he just had to ditch it, come back on the racetrack, losing so much ground, so much speed, and would pit 1 lap later. Johnson, who ran into the back of him, was furious with Hamlin because of the fact that Hamlin did not give out a hand signal. He didn't turn left down to the apron on the backstretch to signal, hey, I am pitting. He didn't do any of that, so you really can't put the blame on Jimmy there because he didn't know that he was going to pit, but that absolutely killed Hamlin's chances. It went from him being contender for the race win to then him struggling to be in the top 10 because he got sent all the way back to 13th place when a caution came out for debris on the back straightaway. So that takes Hamlin out of the mix. So you restart with your usual suspects, Mark Truex Jr., Kyle Busch, and Chase Elliott. But now you even have some new faces, Austin Dillon and Eric Jones. Remember, like I said, finished in the top 10 in Stage 2. Now they're in the top 5 for the race win. So Chase Elliott gets out in front, gets a good run, good lead on Truex, but Truex is starting to close in. We know Truex has always had a faster car than Elliott, and it really showed there. As the laps were starting to wind down, Truex was getting closer and closer. Then with 15 laps to go, everything changed. Chase Elliott, for some odd reason, goes to the bottom of the track instead of up top, which is where Truex ran. Because of that, Truex got a massive run off of 4 and got right up to the back bumper of Elliott. They both did a bit of a zigzag moves on each other, and Truex was able to get underneath Elliott. And then entering turn 1, Truex was about to clear Elliott, but he was not clear, was almost clear, slides up. Both Elliott and Truex smack the outside wall. Both suffer huge damage to the right side of the race car, so much so that Truex, he had to pit about 1 or 2 laps later because of a threat of a tire possibly going down. Chase Elliott, although he would not pit, his car was done. He would fall like a rock, and that meant that the third place driver, which at that time was Kevin Harvick, will come over and take the lead. And who's behind him? Austin Dillon. Austin freaking Dillon, a driver that no one expected to be anywhere near the top 5, the top 10, to say the least. Everyone put him as one of the first drivers to be out in the round of 16. here he is having a shot at a race win in the Southern 500. But we know Harvick has a much faster car than Dillon, and Kevin Harvick will go on to win the Southern 500 for the second time in his career and would win in 2020 for the 8th time this season. Here's a look at the unofficial results from this race. Second place, Austin Dillon. Third, a huge rebound for Joe Logano. Fourth, Eric Jones. Fifth and sixth, teammates William Byron and Alex Bowman. Kyle and Kurt Busch, 7th and 8th. Eric Almirola in 9th. And Clint Bowyer rounds out the top 10. 11th place is a 2-car Brad Keselowski. 12th is Cole Custer. And Denny Hamlin was not able to recover from that pit road incident. He would finish in 13th. 14th is Matt Kenseth. And 15th is Ryan Newman. Here's some other notables in page number 2. Jimmy Johnson, the 18th spot. Looks like that damage from the 11th car of Hamlin hurt his race car. Tough break for him because he had a really strong car in this race. Chase Elliott, 20th after that incident between him and Martin Truex Jr. Tough break for him, including the 21 car of Matt DiBenedetto. He was, sorry to say this, but horrible. 21st for him, 22nd Martin Truex Jr. And then you see Ryan Blaney, the lowest or the worst of the playoff drivers. He would finish in 24th. And you see other drivers in the third and final page. You had drivers like Christopher Bell suffered damage earlier in the race, as well as Bubba Wallace, who suffered, I believe, electrical damage or clutch issues or engine issues with the race car. It was a mechanical issue, to say the least. He made numerous pit stops from the racetrack to the garage to back to the racetrack, so he would finish in the 38th spot. And now let's take a look at the playoff grade. After the first race of NASCAR's playoffs, Kevin Harvick, he can breathe happily heading into Richmond and Bristol. He's the only driver currently that's locked in. Denny Hamlin, 54 points above Joe Logano, Brad Keselowski, 3rd and 4th. Alex Bowman and 5th. Martin Truex Jr. and Chase Elliott fall to 6th and 7th. 16 points for Truex and 12 points for Elliott. 8th is Austin Dillon, a huge pickup for him. 9th is William Byron, Kyle and Kurt Busch, 10th and 11th. And Eric Almirola holds the final playoff spot, tied with teammate Clint Bowyer. Rookie Cole Custer, his teammate, back in 14th spot, 3 points behind. And Matt DiBenedetto and Ryan Blaney both tied for 15th and 16th. Minus 17 behind Almirola. So what are my thoughts on this race? Well, it was your typical Southern 500, I felt like. Especially with this package, very dull. Cars got spread out, very hard to close in. That was fun, I would say. Those last 18 to 15 laps, that battle between Truex and Elliott, that was a lot of fun to watch. It reminded me so much of yesterday's Xfinity race between Chastain and Hamlin. And then, I mean, what a coincidence. Yesterday, the 3rd place driver won the race in the Xfinity Series in Brandon Jones. And today, Harvick, a 3rd place car, comes by out of nowhere and wins the race. Now, I was very surprised by how much speed Hendrick brought in, especially with Chase Elliott and Jimmy Johnson, even though Johnson were to fall off, and actually Bowman and Byron would have really strong runs, I think 5th or 6th. Yes, 5th and 6th, 5th for Byron and 6th for Bowman. They brought in some really good speed. I was quite surprised about how much speed they brought into this race. Kyle Busch, I mean, he finished 7th, don't get me wrong, but if you watch that entire race, I mean, 9th in stage 1, 6th stage 2, it was an improvement, I guess you could say. It was alright, but nowhere near what we expected from Kyle Busch. I had, and a lot of people probably had Kyle Busch as, okay, when the playoff starts, he's going to flip the switch. He's going to be out there running up front, being competitive for the win. And we just didn't see that. We saw him being in contention for like a top 10 or a top 5, but we just knew he was not going to be able to challenge for the race win. Even though when he was out in front side by side with Truex, we just knew that Kyle Busch did not have the car to go out there and contend for the win. Brad Keselowski, I mean, look, 11th place, it might not look good, but from how up and down his day went, I say 11th place is a win. I mean, it was a really good recovery by the number 2 team. I thought they were done. I thought, oh, they're going to be 24th, 25th. They're going to be somewhere near Ryan Blaney's position. But no, they recovered nicely to rebound for an 11th place run. But yeah, like I said, overall, it was your typical Southern 500. Again, I wasn't expecting much because this package kind of sucks. But it was all right. Again, it was, with Throwback Weekend and with a track like Darlington, it's the event itself, at least in my opinion, sort of makes up for the racing. Even though it wasn't the best racing, it was pretty poor at best. Just seeing the throwback paint schemes, you know, and learning the stories of the cars, having a stage 2, Earnhardt Jr., Jarrett, and Kyle Petty. Even in those 3 drivers, or those 3 broadcasters, I should say, made that stage entertaining. even though nothing was happening. They still made it somewhat entertaining, so I applaud NBC for that. But yeah, next weekend we'll be at Richmond next Saturday, and it'll be running with high horsepower, low downforce, thank the Lord. And yeah, overall, I give this race, I don't know, what would you call it, typical? 6 out of 10? I don't know. But it was, let's just say, Xfinity was much better. High horsepower, low downforce. I think that's all I need to say regarding this race. High horsepower, low downforce. But that's going to conclude this episode of MDK Victory Stop. Tell me what you guys' thoughts on this race in the comment section down below. But until next time, my name is Jack Cross from MDK, and I'll see you guys next time.